Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. The show you are about to hear is in the future. Everything that has come before this show is in the past. All of human history has conspired to make the world around you as it is right now. Your level of comfort, sense of self, and state of mind are just as much a part of who you are in the world as they are the history of the universe unfolding into you. And because within your psychological state, the history of the universe still reverberates in resonating remembrances of the Big Bang, we invite you into the future, your future, to learn new things about the history of the universe, the creation of your mind, and the origin of scientific concepts that we have yet to discover. All this and more here on This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind I can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science radio show to you, Kirsten.
Hey, good science radio show to you too, Justin. Good to see you. It's been a week since I last saw your smiling face. How are the teeth doing?
They're all still there.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
I haven't had to have any of them pulled out yet.
All right. So as of the end of last week's show, we were wondering whether or not you would still have your teeth. You still have them all.
I still got them. I don't know for how much longer, but they're still there right now.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody. This is This Week in Science. I'm Dr. Kiki. And that other silent guy is Justin.
Oh, me? I'm supposed to jump it. I was just going to agree with you. I
jump
believe
in.
her. I'll vouch for her. That's her.
That's right. Well, today we have science news. That's what you come to us for, right? To bring you science news and opinionation for the next hour. I brought some stories about slushy moons, electric microbes, and long-distance dinos. What did you bring, Justin?
I have got Clymidia.
Oh dear.
Yeah,
I really don't like hearing
the climate
that.
disease. The climate disease. I have a couple stories on climate disease. I'm going to go and read the full. I did a quick version of this food poisoning Campylobacteria last week. I'm going to read the full story this week. And stress in groups, whether or not anxiety is a contagious state.
I wonder if it is. I bet it is. I wouldn't be surprised, but I'd love to. I can't wait to hear the story. Let's get right to it, shall we? Science! Science, science! Electric microbe hair! How about that for some good science news? Researchers at University of Southern California have hooked up some bacteria to conductive wires. Publishing in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, they have published what they say is the first measurement of electron transport along biological nanowires produced by bacteria. So they've looked at this species of bacteria. This one particular is called Schuanella oneadensis. See if I can get that out there. Schuanella oneadensis MR1. Schuanella is just one species of the gene, and they all seem to produce these nanowires that are external hair-like filaments that come off of their cell body. They've shown before that these microbes, that there is electrical activity in the wires, but not necessarily that the wires can carry a current. And so these researchers actually they went in to test the conductivity of the nanowires. The nanowires are made up just of protein, completely of protein, and they look like just a long hair that sticks out of the body. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like an an axon coming out of a nerve cell, but even thinner, a dendrite maybe, or like a hair coming out of your head even. They grew cultures of the Shewanella bacteria and then put them on a surface that had microscopic electrodes across it. They then positioned the bacteria and the electrodes to try and get the nanowires that grew out of the bacteria to fall across two electrodes. So you have the two electrodes, which one would be a positive and one would be a negative. And if they're connected, a current should flow between them. And so their hope was that the nanowires of these bacteria would fall across and allow the current, then complete the circuit and allow the current to flow across the electrodes. And that's exactly what happened.
Whoa.
This is the first time that this has been shown. And they've thought that there was some kind of electrical communication or activity going on in some species of bacteria, but they hadn't really figured it out this far before now. And so what they think is that instead of just chemical communication, which most species of bacteria use chemicals to communicate, that's kind of slow. You're hampered by the speed of the chemicals moving through whatever solution you live in, right? So what about you can touch each other with your wires, like kind of holding hands, and send a message to the other bacteria in your colony, in your biofilm, whatever it is, that something has happened and you need to respond in a particular way. So they don't know exactly the use that these nanowires have for the bacteria, but they do assume that it's some kind of communication purpose.
Telephone.
Yeah, basically.
It's a bacterial version of a telephone.
Exactly. They say these Shewanella bacteria have to dump electrons. So they produce electrons and they have to get rid of them somehow. So in the case of this particular bacteria, additionally, it's kind of like breathing. So the example that this press release gives is that humans respire by giving up electrons to oxygen. So our act of respiration and how that works. We have electrons that are produced by our metabolism, and in that process, they need to be gotten rid of somehow. Those electrons are transferred to oxygen, or the other way around, actually. But and we exhale carbon dioxide. So oxygen comes in, electrons are transferred, it's changed into carbon dioxide, and then it is respired out. The bacteria in this case, however, lose their electrons to some kind of metal, say iron, if they live in an iron-rich environment. And that's how they basically breathe, is by using these wires maybe to give up electrons. And they say that he says that if you don't give it an electron acceptor, it dies. It dies pretty rapidly. And so if there's no electron acceptor, how are they going to survive? Maybe they support each other by touching each other and using their reach to touch other sources of electron acceptors. So it's kind of like a group electron dump. Yeah, there are all sorts of interesting ideas. And the question now is, if we can figure out how it works, are these kinds of bacteria involved in infections and biofilms that we might want to get rid of? Is there a way to disrupt biofilms by disrupting electrical currents? How can we actually start using this information to understand and work with, or I guess against, the bacteria that they're looking at? That's a big question.
They will actually die if they don't.
Yeah.
If they don't release a load of electrons.
Yeah, and they think nanowires are pretty widespread, not just this species or genus has them.
They're so like us in so many ways. Bacteria. The more I learn about bacteria and what goes on in that little micro world, the less unique this macro upper whatever large size version really doesn't seem so different. They have so many traits and capacities of sharing information and communication and society and the way they're configured. They have altruism that takes place at that level. They have wars. They have suicide bombers and weapons of mass destruction that they can formulate and use against enemy colonies. I mean, it's just so. And then you start to look at it all, and it's like, yeah, well, we've got art and literature and cars, but the way we behave hasn't really changed much since those early days.
Right. If we just look at the bacteria and the yeast, we'll just understand so much about ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We can figure out that what we're doing is just our natural way of being in the world,
Yeah, there was a question there. The Chilean miners who were just rescued from the mine that they've been trapped in for over 2 months. It's craziness. There was a comment that I heard on the radio this morning saying, on one hand, as humans, we can band together and help each other and help, 60 or 30 miners out of a mine. But then we turn around and we wage war on another country. So on one hand, we can be so gracious and helpful. On the other hand, so destructive. And it's the exact same thing with bacteria.
There may be the solution to preventing any future wars. If you're the country who's about to get attacked, have everybody jump down a well, and the entire world will come to your rescue, and we'll forget all about whatever got you into that mess in the first place.
Right. Exactly. Let's move forward. What kind of stories? What story did you bring? What do you want to talk about?
I don't know. There's this is 2 chlamydia stories sort of in
one.
one.
Yeah, the chlamydia. This week in the end of the world, we're all going to die of chlamydia. Great.
I kind of don't know where to start with this one. I think I'll do this one, though. Americans' knowledge of climate change. There was a report that was done, results from a national study on what Americans understand about how the climate system works, causes, impacts, potential solutions to chlamydia. Among other findings, the study identifies a number of important gaps in our public knowledge and our most common misconceptions about it. They found that 63% of Americans believe that global warming is happening, though many do not understand why. If great, 63% is a fantastic number, by the way. I think that's like double what it was when we were talking about this sort of thing 5-6 years ago. That's an incredible improvement. However, as far as their general knowledge on why and how it works and what's responsible for these things, if they were to grade them as though it were a class subject, 8% of Americans would get an A or a B. 40% would receive a C or a D, and 52% would get an F. So it's
that
right
sounds
there.
That sounds like right up there in my introductory biology and chemistry classes in college.
Yeah, it's right in there with
weeder
our high
classes.
school dropout rates too. It's all right. That's normal. Nothing surprising there. Wow. So a lot of people still think that. Here it is. 57% know that greenhouse gas effect refers to gases in the atmosphere that trap heat. 57%. 50% understand that global warming is caused by mostly human activities. I think there's a large percentage that maybe still think it's cows that are responsible. 45% understand that carbon dioxide traps heat from the Earth's surface. That's cool. But a lot of people still think the ozone layer is responsible. The aerosol spray cans are contributing to global warming, leading many to incorrectly conclude that banning aerosol spray cans or stopping rockets from punching holes in the ozone layer are the solutions that we need. Wow. Most Americans do understand emissions from cars, trucks, and other burning fossil fuels contribute to global warming, and that a transition to renewable energy sources is an important solution. Ooh. See, this is this is whole last week's rant that
Which
conservation.
we'll get into at the end of the show. We'll go back into
We'll
that.
get into that again. Okay.
That's one of
that
the
was,
Minion mailbags. So we'll talk a little bit.
But this is an important thing. When the general public, when the majority of your general public in the United States start to understand what a solution is, you better check your findings. That probably means that it's because I'm saying that people are, never mind. So along this line, though, this was another study, or this is on carbon dioxide in terms of controlling the Earth's temperature. So even though carbon dioxide, it's that rise that has, the hockey stick graph, the higher the carbon is, the higher the temperatures have been globally, the amount of carbon that's actually in the atmosphere is still numbered in parts per million. And the larger greenhouse gases, like the largest one of all, is water vapors. And there's a bunch of other gases out there that are also involved. So the question is, one of the arguments against global warming is that there's so many greenhouse gases that are out there in abundance that carbon is such a smaller portion of that.
Right.
And how could it have that much of an effect? Well, there's a study here that's kind of shedding a little bit of light on that. It's a atmosphere ocean climate modeling study that shows that the planet's temperature ultimately depends on atmospheric carbon dioxide. The study, conducted by Andrew Lakis and colleagues at NASA Goddard Institute of Space Studies in New York, examined the nature of Earth's greenhouse effect and clarified the role that greenhouse gases and clouds play in absorbing outgoing infrared radiation. Notably, the team identified non-condensing greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, ozone, and chlorofluorocarbons as providing the core support for the terrestrial greenhouse effect. So without the non-condensing greenhouse gases, the water vapor and clouds were unable to provide feedback mechanisms that amplify the greenhouse effect. So they ran this study basically taking out everything but the moisture in the atmosphere and seeing what would happen. And all the moisture froze in our atmosphere, fell down to Earth, which became an ice ball, and no more global warming. So what it is though, even though it's a tiny percent or a small percent of, it's a small percent of the overall gases in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide alone is responsible for 80% of the radiative forcing that sustains the Earth's greenhouse effect. So it's a catalyst in a much larger system. It's not just like that's one more particle to the Earth's blanket, but it's the one that actually sets off the chain of events that leads to the greenhouse effect.
So carbon is essential.
It's the key.
Everything. It's the key.
It's the one.
Mm-hmm.
Has much more impact than the other gases that are out there, even though it is not the largest percentage of our atmosphere.
Yeah, and that's always been an argument that I've had issue with. It's not that, it's such a small part of the atmosphere. How could it have a big effect? Tiny things have huge effects all the time, and to disregard things just because they're small in concentration, small in size, is usually a big mistake. Lots of things have been overlooked historically just because it's like, oh, what kind of impact could that possibly have? And it just seems to be, it's been shown multiple times that, yeah, carbon dioxide specifically is it's not just carbon, but carbon dioxide specifically is the major player in the atmospheric greenhouse effects. One of the reasons is that it builds up and lasts for so long in the atmosphere, whereas something like methane, which is more abundant in the atmosphere, it lasts for a much shorter period of time. So it'll have a much more, the effects that it has will be much more short-lived, or not much more short-lived, much less lived. See if I can get the wording right there.
Yeah, what is carbon? Carbon's got like a 50-year atmospheric tour of duty every time it goes up there.
Carbon dioxide is 50 years, and methane, I believe, is 8, something like that.
And then the number one absorber of carbon on our planet is
the ocean.
The oceans, which if they fill up and stop absorbing, then does that mean then that 50-year cycle just continues? That 50-year tour gets renewed? Like, what happens? What happens if we can't pull it out of the atmosphere through the ocean anymore?
Right. If the ocean fills up, if its sponge-like qualities that allow it to soak up carbon dioxide diminish, then carbon dioxide will continue to increase in the atmosphere. Its concentration will increase, and that's going to have we'll see even more dramatic effects as we move into the future. One of the biggest things with that, though, is we count on the ocean. I mean, it's this whole thing, the ocean will soak it up. But we can't count on the ocean to soak it up, because the ocean is the life that exists in the ocean exists there based on the pH of the ocean. And so as carbon dioxide concentration in the ocean increases, the pH is going to change and the oceans will become much more acidic. So we're going to find acidic oceans breaking down coral reefs. Coral reefs not as easy to form. Any animal that uses uses calcium carbonate to be able to build its shells will be much less likely or able to do that. A lot of the base of the food chain will be significantly affected by increases in acidity in the ocean. And the amount of Jeremy in the chat room says, how acidic will the oceans be when they can't absorb any more CO2? I don't know the actual amount, but I'm sure that if you could figure out volumetrically, it's probably just an acid-base balance, stoichiometric balance equation. That if you could figure out how much water is in the oceans and the exact acidity that it is right now and what will balance it out with the atmospheres, it probably could be calculated. And I wouldn't doubt that scientists have already tried to calculate it.
Yeah, it's possible. The problem is whenever we're actually going to be able to see what the threshold is the point when it's too late to do anything about it.
Yeah, that's very pessimistic. Let's think optimistically.
It's not pessimistic. It's it's the rule of doubling. It's this exponential rule, which is like, I've seen it in something before, but if you have a jar and there's a bacteria in there and he doubles every like 30 seconds or something, the point at which the average bacteria can tell that they don't have room to double again is like, it's too late. It's if it's a 24-hour period, it happens in the last like 30 seconds that they figure out, we're not going to be able to do this again, and the society's going to be ruined. It's the very last second in the very last 30 seconds in a 24-hour period of them doing this doubling that they realize they've reached the end of their ability to expand within the space.
So are you saying that we are those bacteria and we're in those?
Partly that, but I'm also saying that there's going to be this. I'm actually positive. I think that the event in Guatemala is very encouraging because it showed that in a very dire situation, it was possible to move a number of people who were trapped below the ground onto the surface of the earth to save their lives. I think we're going to need a lot of that technology in the future when we're sending people above ground to scavenge from bits of the previous society and technology to bring down to our underworld. Occasionally, they're going to get trapped up there, and we're going to have a way to drill up and rescue them back down to the safe, cool underworld again. So,
right. Okay.
I only think positively, Kirsten.
Okay, Mr. Positive. I'm moving into the next topic, which is life in our solar system that might not be on our planet, but could give insight into how it got to our planet. 2 stories this week I thought were extremely exciting. The first one, sent in by Ed Dyer, is related to Saturn. They're both actually related to moons of Saturn, and they link together very nicely. Enceladus, it's a small moon of as far as Saturn's moons go. It's an icy moon, and it was this last year that the Cassini spacecraft, while flying around Saturn, imaged Enceladus and saw jets of water, liquid water, being sprayed out of the surface of the planet from cracks in the surface of the planet. And since then, people kind of looked at it originally and were like, oh, icy planet, great, icy rocky planet. But then all of a sudden, based on this image evidence, people went back to the drawing board and said, how on earth could Saturn have water? And if it does have water, how warm is it? It's liquid water. So is it possible that this liquid water could harbor life? And if it did, what would be necessary for for life to have formed there? So the first thing is that there needs to be some kind of a consistency over a long, long period of time in the heating of the planet. So Enceladus is this pretty small planet. It's about 500 miles across. And as far as the bulk or the size of the planet goes, it's just not big enough to have a lot of internal heat production. So it won't have enough radioactive material in that mass to be able to actually produce enough heat to keep the water warm, to keep it liquid long enough to have life. So what's going on? The surface of Enceladus is about 324 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. Cold, really cold. Yeah, really cold. So with temperatures like that, what is going on? Researchers took a look and they started thinking that, okay, what could be working? They looked at how Enceladus was moving around Saturn, and they found that it has an oval-shaped orbit. And with this oval-shaped orbit, its bulk is being tugged at in different, in uneven ways by both Saturn and by other moons around it. So they started thinking that maybe the large moon Dione, is it Dione? Dione, that is near it was pulling on it as well. And so they modeled in a computer what would be happening with the orbit of Enceladus as it moves around and with the heating of the surface that they've noticed. So they found that the gravitational tidal action produces stress on Enceladus that cracks the surface in some areas, and those cracks get pulled back and forth, and they stress against each other, and that produces heat in the moon. And then they tried matching everything up. Dr. Terry Herford of NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, was talking about how they thought if they put this map of the gravitational tidal stress on the crust and compared it to warm zones that were seen on the surface by Cassini when Cassini looked at it with an infrared spectrometer, you'd think that it would match up. And what he says is, however, they don't exactly match. For example, in the fissure called the Damascus Sulcus, the area experiencing the greatest amount of shearing is about 50 kilometers from the zone of the greatest heat. And so they're like, okay, what's going on? Looked at it some more, started looking at the effect of moons around it, like I mentioned. They said that because of, if they put the other effects into it, Enceladus has a slight wobble. It just wobbles as it orbits. And that very slight wobble allows the fissures to line up with the heating almost exactly. So they think they've figured it out, that basically it's the tidal action of orbiting Saturn plus the wobble from Dione, and all that adds together to crunch and move the surface of the planet just enough to have created to create enough heat to keep the interior of the moon liquid, which could, because it would happen over a long period of time, be consistent enough to support life.
That's awesome. A
Yeah.
completely different form of plate tectonic going on.
Right, exactly. A completely different form. It is plate
And
tectonics.
externally driven. Well, but I mean, it's an externally driven heat creation. Our planet, we do it internally, largely for the, for our tectonics. And then we're close enough to the sun for some, for a good amount of help there. But that's really cool. It just creates a whole nother scenario for life to exist on a planet.
Right, exactly. And then the second moon story, another one in Titan's atmosphere. It's been thought that the building blocks for life might exist in Titan's atmosphere. A researcher, Sarah Horst at the University of Arizona, just reported where was she that she reported it? She was at a conference somewhere, and I'm completely missing the reference. There we go. American Astronomical Society's Division of Planetary Sciences in Pasadena, California, this last week. She reported that she and her team simulated the atmosphere of Titan. I talked about Enceladus spraying these jets of water from its surface. Well, those jets of water actually sometimes they spray Titan and give Titan oxygen. So they took a whole bunch of basic ingredients that would be in the upper atmosphere of Titan and modeled it in the laboratory. They put together nitrogen, methane, and carbon monoxide in a reaction chamber, and then they zapped that reaction chamber with not actual solar radiation. They simulated it with a high frequency radio radiation. They needed it to be strong enough, powerful enough to break nitrogen bonds. But once they were able to hit it with enough radio radiation, they broke the nitrogen bonds in the compounds in their reaction chamber and ended up replicating what is in the atmosphere of Titan. They found that various complex molecules like amino acids, nucleotide bases could form just by having simple ingredients like nitrogen, methane, and carbon monoxide in the upper atmosphere of Titan, without a surface, without liquid water, just with solar radiation and those ingredients that you could get, the basic building blocks of life. So so these two stories together, I think, are really fascinating.
Yeah, that just opens up another whole new slew of planetoids that are out there wandering around the ginormous universe that we're in, that could be sustaining some kind of organic life type thing.
Yeah, type thing. It's time for us to take a break.
We'll be back right after this with more This Week in Science.
That's right.
Behold the Oklahoma plain, planted with a single strain, a blanket spun from golden grain, 1 trillion stalks of wheat. On every stalk, a perfect head, the kernels keep the combines fed, then off to manufacture bread, so everyone can eat. Ain't it beautiful? Ain't it clever? Ain't it just about the best news ever? A farmer feeds a nation's needs when man and nature work together. About a half a world away.
Audible.com is the leading provider of audiobooks with over 75,000 different titles in a variety of different genres. This Week in Science has found many science-based books in their library that we have enjoyed, and non-science-based books because they have so many things to choose from. You can find books in fiction, nonfiction. You can find periodicals. You can even find podcasts. Unfortunately, not Twis. But Audible will let you have a free audiobook download if you sign up today. So all you need to do is go to audiblepodcast.com/Twis and you sign up. You get a free audiobook download, and then you continue to reap the benefits of portable audiobook goodness. You can download your audiobooks from your computer to any portable device that you want. Take it with you. It's very easy. Very, very easy and entertaining, educational, insightful. Well, I guess, yeah, insightful, thought-provoking. There we go. Go to audiblepodcast.com/Twis right now for your free download. Tell them Twis sent you. And the Twis Book Club is reading this month Dark Banquet by Bill Shute. If you are interested in the Twis Book Club reading along with us this month, it's all about blood-sucking creatures of the night. Whoa, that's right. Dark Banquet, it's a book about bats and mosquitoes and all sorts of bloodsuckers and the biology and ecology of these animals. Really interesting read, kind of timed just perfectly for October, the Halloween season. Something a little creepy, but it's all science. It's real. This is real world creepy. It's not fake. So you can read along, grab yourself a copy of Bill Shute's Dark Banquet. Read along. You still have a couple more weeks until the end of the month when we move on to our November book of the month, which is going to be Bad Science by Ben Goldacre. We're very excited that they're releasing Bad Science in the United States. So far, for the last year, I think it was released a year ago in the UK, finally here in the United States, and we're going to get a crack at it. Bad Science by Ben Goldacre. There will be a link at the Twis website, twis.org, so that you can easily purchase the book through Amazon.com, however you prefer to do it. Or, if the book is available at Audible, you can just go to audiblepodcast.com/Twis and maybe get it as your free audiobook download. Can we go back to the show? Is Justin back?
An Afghan farmer starts his day. He swings a scythe to cut his hay. He threshes it by hand. He grows a mix of wheat out here. And when the weather turns austere, a strain or two may persevere, enough to meet demand. Ain't it beautiful? Ain't it clever? Ain't it just about the best news ever? A farmer feeds his family's needs when man and nature work together.
And we're back with more This Week in Science.
That's right. Coming out of into and out of the break was Ain't It Beautiful? I think it's the name of the song, Ain't It Beautiful by Monty Harper off of for the 2010 This Week in Science Music compilation.
Is that on our last compilation?
Yep.
Oh, you know what?
Yep.
I don't think I have that one.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't think I got it.
I gave you a
copy.
copy.
I know I didn't.
I gave you a copy.
No.
Yes.
I never got a copy of that one.
I gave you a copy.
No.
Yes.
I believe you. I believe that you may have handed me a piece of plastic with another piece of plastic in it that had encased in it bits of data that were going to formulate a song if placed in the right reading device. But I don't have it.
Yeah, okay, you don't have it. That doesn't mean I didn't give it to you. Give me a science story, dude. Let's move on with the show.
All right, this is my last science story of the
Okay.
evening. No, I have
That's
to.
fine. Okay.
Anxiety. The reaction to perceived danger in response to that differs from one animal to another, or to humans. It differs what our responses are. So scientists thought, but now researchers at Tel Aviv University are challenging what we know about stress. And their study has implications for helping clinicians better treat victims of terrorism or other natural disasters, or just that sort of ennui of being on the planet without meaning and not knowing how nice that can be. Professor David Elam and his graduate student, Roni Izar of Tel Aviv's University Department of Zoology, are spearheading a study designed to investigate the anxieties experienced by an entire social group at once. So everybody's sort of group thinkness being calculated using natural predator and prey relationship between a barn owl and the vole, a small animal in the rodent family, in case you're not familiar with voles. The researchers were able to test unified group responses to a common threat. The results have been reported in the journal Behavioral Brain Research and Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews, demonstrated that while anxiety levels can differ among individuals in normal circumstances, surprisingly, group members display the same level of anxiety when exposed to a common threat. That's really interesting. So our own personal reaction, we may be able to mitigate it,
Right.
Or we may just kind of fly a little too far off the handle and overreact to it. But as a group, we find a balance, and we sort of all agree, just perhaps unspokenly,
How threatening something is.
We put our own threat level on it. So it kind of feels red to me. No, it's more orange. Orange, yeah, I feel orange. Okay, well, all right, maybe it's not red. Maybe it's just orange. And it was overreact. So that's fascinating. He says that it explains human behavior in response to trauma or terror, such as things that took place after the 9/11 attacks or natural disasters, earthquakes, Haiti, Chile, all this. Oh, by the way, I messed up earlier. The miners that were trapped, I said Guatemala.
You meant Chile.
I didn't mean Chile. I meant Guatemala, but I was wrong. I didn't misspeak. I just didn't.
Just got it wrong.
I was just wrong. I'm not gonna. Professor Elam and his fellow researchers measured the anxiety levels of 3 groups of 10 voles each. They placed the voles in a peaceful environment and measured how much time each vole spent out in the open, and then in the protected areas. The more time the vole spent in protected areas, the higher the anxiety level was thought to be, and this did vary among the different individual voles. Then the researchers exposed the voles to a common threat, placing the vole's cage within a barn owl enclosure.
Wow.
It shouldn't be funny, Justin. This is not funny. This is science. Just picturing the little cage and the bigger cage. Like, what are you talking about? Like, all of a sudden, you're like, everything was cool. We had the play area. We had the little hidey hole. And now we're still in the cage, but there's barn owls everywhere. The vole's experience says was one of being attacked. That's how they kind of reacted. After a night of exposure to their natural predator, the voles were tested once again for anxiety. Now, researchers found that each vole was equally stressed. So before having the common threat, they had variations on the anxiety level with no real threat, all imagined threat or anxieties. And once they were confronted with a real threat, it equalized so that they were all on board.
I think that's really interesting. I'm sure they're measuring cortisol levels in these voles, and to find that the cortisol levels would be the same between within a reasonable amount of variation to be considered basically the same statistically. That's fascinating that the major variation somehow becomes very minor and they regulate. It's fascinating. How does that happen? Is it all just group interaction? I mean, how pheromones? How does that happen? Tell me now. I want to know. Go back to work, scientists. Back to work. Researchers looking at robots. This is this week in World Robot Domination.
Dun, 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 dun.
This week in World Robot Domination, the story is sent in by Jan Cernik and Gord McLeod separately. Jan, Zombie6 on Twitter, was also very excited because the story is out of his native Slovenia. A researcher is developing a robot to punch people in the arm.
What? What?
Yes. This robot arm punches people in the arm. The idea is to teach robots how to be better robots and how better to obey Asimov's rules of doing no harm to humans. So in order to do no harm, they have to do harm first, I think is the thinking.
Yeah.
So the researcher Borut Povs, no, I'm not saying that name correctly, and I apologize. He has ethical approval from his university to do the work, to conduct the research, and he talked 6 male colleagues into allowing a powerful industrial robot to repeatedly punch them in the arm. And in doing so, he's assessing human pain thresholds and what kind of a robot punch does a human consider painful. And so if the punch is too painful, they know to tell the robot to turn it down a little bit. This whole story just makes me laugh.
Oh, you laugh now, Kirsten.
No, I'm not going to laugh when a robot punches me in the face. It'll be no good.
Well, see, the thing is, the robots are going to eventually have to be, the more integrated they become, they're eventually going to have to be exposed to ethical conundrums that us humans still sometimes have to battle. An example off the top of my head is if you're in a burning building of some sort. You're at the top. Here it is. You're on the roof of a burning building. And the only way you're going to get off this burning building alive is if your robot companion picks you up and throws you to the next rooftop that is a building that is not on fire.
But that might do you harm.
That's going to do you some harm now. Yeah. And something could go wrong. The robot could miss, not throw you far enough. Or you can make it over there and safely. If you don't leave this rooftop, you are going to burn to death. So there's got to be some way of getting the robot around that ethical dilemma and throwing you from that one rooftop to the other. However, as soon as robots are capable of making that ethical decision between harming you to save you or doing nothing, then they're going to be able to be manipulated, because then, a robot can be told, well, to save many more lives, these few people must die. Right? When we start doing that,
in the Asimov rules, though, in Asimov's rule, it's no harming, no killing humans. So, if we stick to his rules, the robot will never throw us off the roof. Likewise, robots will no longer be allowed to do anything in a surgical but this doesn't have anything to do with the punching in the arm, really. I mean, what the use of this,
the punching in the arm.
The use of this is what they're trying to do is in industrial applications where there are robots doing lots of high impact things. If there are humans nearby, they will know to reduce their impact by a certain amount, knowing how much they can injure humans. Robots have to know what will hurt a human before they have to know how to not hurt them.
And kill us.
Yeah. Exactly.
But that's the point. But what I'm saying, though, is the rule of no harm being done. Maybe I did take the tangent into the Asimov rule, but then you can't have robots. Okay, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. So where's that? Except where that could conflict with the. So where's that line ever drawn between not injuring or inaction? Because then you're talking about if you have a robot doctor. Would a robot doctor take a chance of doing a surgery if it could harm you. Well, yes, if inaction could also harm you. But then, that's how we convince people to go to war. We tell them that their inaction will cause more harm if you don't go over here and blow this up or shoot at these people. Next thing you know, we have militarized robots who are coming up. Oh, wait. No, we already do.
We already do. That's already good. We have about 10 minutes left in the show. So should we go to another story or should we jump right to Minion Mailbag?
Bring that mailbag. I teased it at the beginning while you were gone.
Yes, the Minion Mailbag. So here we go. Minion Mailbag. First ones first. Surprise, surprise. Minion Jerry Ryan. He actually agrees with Justin. This is a big surprise. So Jerry writes, I was listening to the 10:07 show and heard the listener comment regarding Justin's theory about what happens if we conserve energy and the price of energy goes down. I was listening to another broadcast. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the broadcast now. And the program host was interviewing the author of a book or scientific article about the impact of energy conservation on worldwide oil consumption. The person being interviewed spoke about how we already know what happens when technology leads to more efficient use of an energy source. And he used what happened with coal as an example. As the price of coal fell after better technologies for burning coal were developed and the cost of transporting coal fell with the spread of railroads, more industries developed using coal as the energy source. The cost of the goods produced were cheaper due to the low energy costs. More goods were sold, which increased demand to expand industry. And just as Justin has stated, despite developing more efficient means to use coal, the overall use of coal expanded and more pollution was produced. The author came to the same conclusion as Justin has, which is the only way to decrease energy consumption and to decrease pollution and greenhouse gases is to make the cost of energy high enough that people use less energy. If the United States and European countries decrease energy use and the price of oil falls, the third world countries and rapidly growing countries such as China and India, which have lax pollution controls, will buy more oil, build more factories, and pollution will increase, not decrease. Anyway, he was thinking to himself as he listened, I wonder if Justin from Twis has heard this. Great show.
I wrote the talking points. I'm the one they're cribbing from. Whenever you hear people saying, whenever you hear anybody saying that conservation will ultimately kill us, this is what the heck was that sound?
That was my sound of whatever. The cribbing points. This person wrote a book. I'm sure they came to these conclusions separately from you, but didn't steal from you. Not your idea.
Maybe I read that book.
Maybe you read that book.
Maybe that's. But I don't read books. No, that can't be true. I don't read books.
Right. The no reading one. Okay, next email was from Paula Tomlinson. Paula T says, please tell me I heard it wrong. Did Justin say light is not affected by gravity?
Yes, you did hear it wrong.
Okay, it's been a while. She says, it's been a while. I have to chime in. I can't let it go when you get something wrong about black holes. Yes, gravity affects light. We have Albert Einstein to thank for clarifying that. Although I admit the idea that photons, which have no mass, can have momentum and be affected by gravity is a little non-intuitive at first. It makes more sense if you remember that according to general relativity, it's really the curvature of space that photons are responding to. This effect is observed all the time in gravitational lensing, an incredibly important tool in astronomy. And she gives a link to an example called the Einstein cross.
Whenever anybody counters my point on gravity, light not being affected by gravity, they always point to gravitational lensing. And then they say it's really space that's warping, or it's actually the warpage of space that creates what appears to be the bending light. But that's my point exactly. If something appears to be bending light, it isn't bending light. We know from Einstein that light always travels in a straight line. And the appearance of bending comes from following that straight line through the curvature of space. So what we have to say is that space curves But that doesn't mean that light's being affected at all. There's no relationship. So the few relationships that they've
it would be a transitive property. Gravity affects space, space affects light.
But light's not being affected. And the problem with it is it's been taken to a different key, because they've tried a different point where they've tried to describe how it is that gravity could interact with light. And they've come up with things like the gravity wave. That was Einstein's. That was the relativity camp. So we have the most expensive scientific experiment in the history of the universe, which is LIGO and LIGO 2 and the better LIGO 2 that's coming. And they have not found any indication of a gravity wave. The other end of the spectrum, we have gravitons and bosons as being responsible for gravity's effect. And now they have the Large Hadron Collider, which is the second most expensive experiment in the history of the universe. And they also have yet to have discovered their solution for this problem. And nowhere in my initial readings of Einstein, when he was describing gravity as bending space, did it require for light to be affected or acted upon by gravity as a force. I personally don't think gravity is a force. And I think one of the misnomers too is when we look at this, we have problems in the analogies that stick with people forever. We have something called a gravity well, which is a two-dimensional representation. It's a cone where the mass is supposed to be collected that is creating gravity. And through the spatial warpage of relativity, we think of it like a bowling ball and that rubber sheet, which I can't stand that analogy, but that is the gravity well. It pushes down in one spot on this rubber sheet, and that's your gravity well. Well, the misnomer in the analogy is that is not a gravity well. That is a density of space, of warpaged space created by the mass. And it's not a well of gravity, it's a well of condensed space. If you look at it, not as a two-dimensional, but turn that two-dimensional cone shape into a three-dimensional shape, you'll see it's very dense at its core because it becomes less dense the further away from it you get. So when that light is moving in a straight line, it reaches this point where space is warped into small parts near the point of density and in larger spaces away from it. And that's where you get the curving appearance of gravitational lensing. But there's no interaction there between light and a force of gravity. And this is also why, because so much of that assumption that there's a force, the assumption that there's particles that are interacting that's causing this, that we have a lot of what we do believe about black holes is rooted in that. So I think part of my disagreement with how black holes are viewed is from that fundamental point of the assumption that light can interact with gravity.
Right. So we got to keep moving on here. She goes on to say that also Justin got your wires, that's my wires, a little crossed on the black hole evaporation too. Black hole evaporation, the Hawking radiation is still widely supported, including by Hawking himself. The issue between Susskind and Hawking was about entropy and whether information that falls into a black hole is permanently lost or not. Hawking asserted information was lost and Susskind disagreed. Susskind proposed the holographic principle to explain how information is not lost, and Hawking eventually conceded in 2004. Not everyone agrees with the holographic principle, but I don't think there are too many serious theoretical physicists or astrophysicists arguing against black hole evaporation or in favor of information loss. So I agree with that. And our final letter from Minion Michael, he says the issue of looking at the universe without being fooled by the distortions of the various spheres that surround us is an important one and has been through scientific history. And the best answer that I can give you is read Wrinkles in Time by George Smoot. This book, which I read recently, describes exactly how seriously they look at these issues and in what ways they try to understand and neutralize these signal contaminants in the design of the instruments that are used. By the way, I remember riding my bike across the Massachusetts Avenue Bridge, which adjoins MIT across the Charles River from Cambridge to Boston as a high school student. Painted on the sidewalk were spray-painted marks measuring the bridge from end to end. The bridge was measured in smoots. He was used as a yardstick in a college prank that became a landmark. But he doesn't say anything about that in his book, however. Shout outs to everyone out there who's been listening. All of you in the chat room. Tondagosa, GL Desater, iBookery, Little Hamlet, Fopa Gijo, Aaron B, the Macinjosh, Shadow Network. Who else is in there? All of you in the chat room, thanks for hanging out and watching the show. Do appreciate it. Everyone who sent in stories this week, do appreciate those stories. And unfortunately, we just can't get to every single one of them, but they are all interesting. And I love getting the stories that you mail in. So keep them coming. Next week, more science.
Is there?
There will be more science.
Why does this happen every time? I'm looking for the final countdown of the show, but I can't find it. Oh, here we go.
Why do you make me edit so much?
I don't know why. It's just like it's so many things to remember that I always forget to thank people for listening. Thank everyone for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. TWiS is available via podcast. Just search for This Week in Science in the iTunes directory. Or if you have an Android device, I think it's a phone, you can look for the TWiS for Droid app in the Android marketplace.
And for more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes are going to be available at our website, www.twis.org. Thanks to Patrick, who is writing up our in-depth show notes for us. He's doing a great job. We also do want to hear from you, so email us at kirsten@thisweekinscience.com or twisminion@gmail.com.
You can also contact us on Twitter at Dr. Kiki or at JacksonFly. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, suggestion for an interview, please let us know.
And we're going to be back here next week, same time, same place. We hope you'll join us for more great science news.
Yes, and if you have learned anything from today's show, please remember,
it's all in your head.